It is my delight to present in this common hour a fairly informal panel discussion, virtually and in person, of alumni and hopefully students as well, chipping in on why I vote, talking about the importance of the vote, focused on the personal decisions, the personal relationships, the personal values that come into play when people go into the ballot box or they fill out their mail-in ballot, and determine a good part of this nation's future. I'll be introducing our panelists in just a moment, but first I wanted to acknowledge the work that's been done on campus to engage voters of all kinds and to create voters, to encourage people who are not registered to vote to become voters. The Cabrini Votes initiative was started a few years ago as a student-led initiative, and it continues today under the direction of Evelyn Indente, who is our social work intern in the Wolfman Center. And I very much wanted to thank her and the student volunteers that she's had working with her. I'm going to read out their names briefly, and please, if we can give them a round of applause at the end of that. So Evelyn has recruited a team of students, including Gabriela Ayala, Bianca Huertas Perez, Jemi Medina Raya, Nadia Davis, Gianna Matos, Ridaben Parma, Sister Amarek Leafamo, Jayla Gary, Asada Diawara, Annette Trejo Mora, Mariana Chance, Ameline Nama, Geraldine Brown, Hunter Steelman, and Bushra Islam. These students have done a tremendous job encouraging people to learn about their voting rights, registering students to vote, getting people to request mail-in ballots or to change their voter registration address so that they're ready to participate in the democratic elections this fall. So could we please give a round of applause to the Cabrini Votes team. I'm also going to say, I think we have enough social distancing that if people in the front are comfortable, they may remove their masks. I'm not going to let that dangle there. As a final note there, we would encourage everybody who is part of the Cabrini Votes initiative to pick up their very own pocket copy of the Constitution of the United States, a wonderful founding document to have on hand. Without further ado then, I'm going to try to get out of the way and let our panelists take things away. We're really delighted to have 4 wonderful alums coming back to talk about the importance of voting to them personally and their own involvement with voting. In the room here, we have Aide Cuenca, who is a graduate of the Masters in Leadership Studies program here at Cabrini University, graduated in 2018, and is now working with community-based partnerships and organizations here in the Philadelphia area. We also have Chardonnay White, graduate of Cabrini 2020 in political science and history, and is spending a year doing volunteering with AmeriCorps, and we're very glad to have her here with us. Also an alum of the Cabrini Votes initiative. And then online, we have Alexis Cunningham, and I'm sorry, Mackenzie, you're showing up as Raymond Ward somehow on my screen. I'm not sure why, but you are definitely Mackenzie Harris. Both graduates of Cabrini in 2016, and who are going to offer us a little bit of kind of farther distance perspective on what they experienced at Cabrini and how they are now engaging in elections and voter engagement and the political process in general. So please give me a hand in welcoming these 4 wonderful alums to our conversation. So just in terms of structure of today, I'm going to hand it over to our panelists. We're going to start with Alexis Cunningham, kicking things off. Alexis will go first. Then, let me make sure I've got this right. Then Mackenzie's going next. Then Chardonnay, and then Aide. They're going to share some of their personal thoughts and reflections on voting and the state of things in their own lives and in the United States. And then we'd like to turn that over to a question and answer in the room or online. I'd also really encourage people who have a story that they want to tell about why they vote, why the vote is important to them, that they take the chance to share that with people as well. All right, so I am now done talking. I will get out of the way. Alexis, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Ray. Hey everyone, it's really good to be back virtually. I want to thank Ray for inviting me to attend this event. I'm really excited to share just really a short snippet of why I vote. And I thought I would go with the environmental lens today. So I'm just going to preface this with a little bit of background for context so it's easier for everyone to understand. I grew up on the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland, kayaking and playing in rivers. And it wasn't until late high school that I realized I wanted to study anthropogenic effects on the environment. So I attended Cabrini for political science and environmental studies. And while I was there, I was engaged with Catholic Relief Services, where I learned about a multitude of social issues that demand our attention both nationally and globally. But I felt I wanted to pursue more. So I went to the University of Delaware for my Master of Science in Water Science and Policy. And there at UD, I was able to conduct research on the Chesapeake Bay, attempting to understand perspectives of stakeholders involved in water quality of the Chesapeake Bay. And when I say stakeholders, I mean a broad range of stakeholders from the federal level of government to local communities on the ground, including fishermen and farmers. And so after that, I went off to DC to start a fellowship with two different NGOs where I evaluated the correlation between communities' capacity to properly and efficiently mitigate flooding and disasters and social inequities within those communities. And overall, I found that low income communities do not receive adequate resources to address flooding concerns properly. Um, I'm now working at NOAA as a policy analyst. I'm doing a lot of congressional and legislative engagement for an office there. So I'm working a lot with representatives and senators on the Hill, as well as within district and states. And so I really wanted to provide that contextual background and experience because through my research, especially in grad school and as a fellow, I've heard many communities speak, and I've had the opportunity to interview people on the ground who are being affected the most by our changing climate. I've heard them say that their voice is not always being heard. And when they are, there's not much change happening for them. On the other hand, I've also heard and seen that climate change is not always tangible to folks, and so they don't always understand or believe in it. And so, really broadly for me, I have developed an understanding of how paramount protecting communities, water, and other natural resources is. And there's so much more beyond that than what we're seeing on the news and the media. And so, when I'm voting for the rights of those who are impacted by our changing climate, those who are impacted by the policies. I'm voting for the farmers and the fishermen that I interviewed. I'm voting for the communities facing droughts, for those receiving a lack of clean water. I'm voting for communities who are facing flooding extremities and are not being offered the same types of policies and protections of those of higher income levels. I'm voting because I want to see resources and funding brought to communities who are not mitigating impacts or at least preparing to do so. I'm voting so that when those resources are brought to communities, they can learn more about what is happening around them, and more importantly, so they can make informed decisions. And of course, this goes beyond those I've interacted with during these experiences because I've realized this is happening around us every day, not only on the national, regional, or local level, but this is happening to our next door neighbors. And so I just want to leave it with when you vote, you're exercising your right as a citizen of our country and you're making your voice heard to leaders on the changes you want to see. And with that, that's all I've got.
Thank you so much, Alexis. Can you let us know where you are right now, just by the way?
Yeah, I'm at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I work within one of the line offices, the National Ocean Service, and within that line office, I work for the Office of Response and Restoration.
Beautiful. Excellent. Thank you so much. Mackenzie, let's hand it over to you.
Hey all, my name is Mackenzie Harris. I go by Mac. I'm a creative content manager here in DC. I moved here 4 years ago, right at the beat of the 2016 election. And so to be in DC for all this time, 3 elections, it's been quite the experience. I came to DC along by going to Cabrini, and that's really where I started with activism in the student body. I was the president of CRS, all while really being involved in storytelling and wanting to tell people's stories as a truth teller. And so that led me to wanting to go to DC. I had experience going to Guatemala and Ecuador twice and NOLA. And so all these gifts that Cabrini provided me kind of led me to where I am today. And I think that's part of the Mother Cabrini, patroness saint of immigrants, kind of spirit moving within me and really pushing me to faith-based organizations where I work today. So my organization is called Faith in Public Life, which is a dedicated progressive multi-faith organization dedicated to lifting up faith voices within the progressive movement. And so I'm just really excited to be here today. So thanks, Greg and Wolfington Center for really putting this together. When I think about voting, I'm thinking about how it's truly a call and an act of service and an act of faith. And it's a driving force for, people to play a part in our democracy. So it's incredibly important, it's incredibly sacred, and no one can take that away from you. So when I'm voting for those who were formerly incarcerated and do not have a chance to vote. I'm voting for our undocumented neighbors who, through our backwards laws, do not provide you the ability to have a voice in our democracy. I'm voting for the 545 children that remain parentless at our border. I'm voting for Walter Wallace Jr., who my prayers to the community at Cabrini and the community of Philadelphia, who was shot and killed, a Black man in Philadelphia. And my heart is just broken open in so many ways in the past 4 years. And now I just, all we can do is vote. All we can do is keep moving forward. And that's what we got to do in 2020.
Excellent. Thank you, Mac. Good to see you. Chardonnay, can we hand it over to you?
Hi, can you guys hear me? Okay. I'm Chardonnay White. I recently graduated from Cabrini, so I'm familiar with a lot of people in this room. I'm a lifelong voter. That's what I like to say. I always used to go to the polls with my mom, and she would let me cast the ballot. I think it's illegal, but it's okay. So that's when I started voting. I was always an activated voter. I registered to vote when I was 17 and a half, 6 months before my birthday, and my first election was when I was 18. It was 2016, and that was a lot. I was in college when it happened. It was my freshman year. I was a bio major, and I told everyone, I was like, if Trump wins, I'm going to change my major to political science. So, it was kind of a blessing and a curse because I really liked the path that I'm on now with political science and history, but I kind of wish he hadn't won. But, you win some and you lose some. And then my sophomore year, I got involved with Next Gen America, which is a progressive organization which focuses on youth voter engagement. And I did that for about a year and a half. I was registering people at my local community college, and that's where I went to school for 2 years. And then I graduated and I transferred to Cabrini, where I didn't do that work here. I still worked for them, but that's when I joined Cabrini Votes. And I helped students on campus get activated to vote. And now I still do the same work. I just don't do it as a job. I don't get paid for it, but I am currently phone banking. So that's always something. And the reason why I vote, Mine's a little more like personal to me. I vote for people who look like me. There wasn't always a time when Black women could easily go to the polls and vote, and I keep that in my mind often. I make sure that I use it as my duty because my great grandmother didn't have the opportunity to vote. She marched on Washington. She did all these things. So I feel like it's my duty to continue on that commitment and that promise to her that I made that I would always vote and do my duty. Yeah, so I vote for people who look like me. I vote for people who don't have the access to vote. I vote for people whose human rights and dignity is put into question every day by the Supreme Court, by the president, by the current administration. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much, Arne. Do you want to plug yourself too a little bit? Do you want to? I think you're doing some podcasting that you might want to.
Oh, yes. If anyone's interested, I do have a podcast. I talk about like voting engagement and other things like that. It's more like a lifestyle blog, but trust me, I'll talk about the election coming up. It's Glass of Chardonnay, little play on the name. So if anyone's interested, it's available on all streaming platforms.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And finally, Ide.
Yeah, so thank you again for having me back here on campus. I graduated in 2018, and interesting a fact about myself is that I'm actually can vote here, and the reason is because I came here to Cabrini as an international student 3 years ago. But while I was at Cabrini, I got involved with the voting initiative, Cabrini Votes Initiative, and I was so passionate about it. And so what I wanted to share a little bit with you is my experience of why even though I knew that I couldn't vote here, it was important for me to support this initiative here at Cabrini. And the biggest reason is because back in Ecuador, when I was in my teen years, I also was one of those teenagers that I thought voting wasn't going to change anything, that I was too young to actually have an impact or anything. And I felt kind of like hopeless about the system. But sharing my experience with other peers led me to find a community of friends that also have the same concerns, the same questions, but wanted to do something and change something. And I think it was that journey of empowerment and recognizing the power that I have within me, and recognizing that politics or participating in these democratic processes is about your participation, is about your voice, and reclaiming that voice helped me to understand that I couldn't give that up easily. I couldn't let that vote, that voice that belongs to me, to someone else, that I needed to involve. And so that process helped me to gather with some friends and start like a youth group. And one of our focus was to basically go to high schools and speaking and having workshops with other folks about like the voting and the importance of voting in my home country. So, and it was interesting to see how people that sometimes were for low-income neighborhoods were told that it doesn't matter, like you don't have the power. But it was interesting to see that shift in their mentality, and kind of like shifting that idea of like, no, like I have a say here, I have the power here, and I can do something. If I speak up and I start sharing my stories, I can connect and find a community, and we can do something no matter how young am I. Because narrative out there is that, and I've experienced it here, is that young people don't know what they want. They don't know and not interested. And that's not true at all. That's a narrative that I was told when I was growing up. And it took me time, but I found that it wasn't true. And kind of like learning that for me was a reclaiming of that power, empowerment. And it felt something that changed inside of me. And with that, like we, as I say, we were able to create this group. We did a lot of workshops, and we were able to connect with other organizations in my city and got involved in meetings where people were like outlining policies for health education for young folks. So it was a very interesting experience. So when I arrived to Cabrini and I heard about Cabrini Vote Initiative, I was like, I know I can vote, but this is the beauty of this process that is also here in the United States, and it's part of our democracies, and it's the beauty of like that we have right now that we can exercise this right. And of course, I learned how you guys do here because of course it's different from Ecuador. But the more I learned, the more fascinated I was, and the more I wanted more young adults, young people to get involved with that, and find friends like Shar here and other folks that I work with during my time here that were so passionate about it. And that's the first step, right? Voting is the first step, and reclaiming that power is your first step. Then how you move forward, that's up to you. But at least let's take that first step. So maybe I can vote here, but I want to say that why I encourage people to vote here in my time at Cabrini, because it's a personal choice, it's a personal opportunity to reclaim that power that is within you, but also it's a community opportunity. It's how, like the things that my the other panelists have said, is thinking about how that power that you hold and that is it belongs to you. You can use it. You can use it to learn, to advocate, and to support your community.
I'm going to give some snaps to that. I'm sorry. Thank you, everybody. I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping and then maybe throw a question to the panel. So just first, I forgot to mention at the very beginning, maybe I'll step into the camera view here. Danton Moyer was scheduled to be a part of this panel, but he had a last minute hearing come up at the courthouse in Norristown. He's an assistant district attorney there and was excited to share some of his views on these things as well. Mackenzie Mac really graciously agreed to step in and pinch hit for us. Mac, thanks so much for joining us on that one. Anybody who has questions or wants to share a story, I'd encourage you, if you're in the room, just kind of give me a heads up and we'll get you a mic, or you can speak out to the room and I can repeat it for everybody on Zoom. If you're on Zoom and you'd like to ask a question, type it into chat, or if you'd like a chance to be on camera on the Jumbotron here, we can put you in, and we'd love to hear either a question that you have or a story that you'd like to share. But while people are kind of ruminating on that and processing what we've heard, I wanted to throw back to the panel. We've heard a couple people talk about the misconceptions people have of the youth vote. And so I'm 42, so I'm gonna consider myself no longer a youth, but can any of you comment on those misconceptions of the youth vote? What are people saying about millennials or Gen Zers that are wrong and that they should think differently about?
I mean, I can go too. So okay, this is a good question for me because I did this work and I studied like the analytics of it for a little bit. So a big misconception is that what I did was saying is that we don't understand politics or we're not interested. A big thing is that people assume that we're not interested. I think a big thing that I've noticed with especially Gen Z is that we're not single issue voters like our parents. A lot of our parents vote on one issue or they vote for a candidate based on one issue, while we care about so many different issues and we're so multifaceted that it's overwhelming. It's a lot to take in. I know I do this work and I'm overwhelmed all the time. So imagine someone who doesn't have the capacity to like sit back with their thoughts and talk with others who have similar viewpoints. That's a really big thing. Another thing is that we just don't think our vote matters. That is kind of less of a misconception and more of just like kind of a reality for a lot of people. Not that it's true, but they think that because of the Electoral College, like we're taught throughout school, the Electoral College was put in place so long ago and it's for people in rural communities. So we're like, why would we vote if we live in this metropolitan area that is going to go blue or red no matter what? So that's a really big thing for Gen Z. But I know a big thing on TikTok anyone's on there. A lot of educational things have been going on about how much your vote matters and how the election in 2016 was lost by about a little over, well, almost 80,000 votes across like 5 swing states. So that puts a lot of things into perspective. And if anyone thinks their vote doesn't matter, an election in Allegheny County in like 2018 or 2017 was decided by less than 500 votes. So every vote matters, no matter if you think it does or it doesn't, it does. So, yeah.
Yeah, plus one
All
to
right,
that.
so I guess I'm up next. Oh, sorry. Please continue.
Thanks, Jen. We'll get to you in a second.
My bad.
I was just going to say plus one to that, Chardonnay. Thanks for bringing the analytics into the conversation. I think the one thing that I just want to say is that millennials and Gen Zers are storytellers, but in a digital way. I mean, they're the ones who are getting out the vote and talking and creating a safe space online where people can share resources. And, you know, it's just part of a space that we're all in right now. So kind of this really beautiful coming together collective space.
Just following up on that, do you feel like there is a sense of union amongst your generation? Just to kind of finish that up, are you feeling that collective space, or how does that? Yeah, nuance that just a bit, and then we'll turn to John.
It's a very interesting question. I'm in a very interesting place. You know, physically, geographically, I'm in DC. I think, you know, it's 97% Democratic city. And so, you know, but I'm from Pennsylvania. I'm from, you know, PA turned red in my county and back in 2016. And so to kind of have that understanding and that background, you know, I don't think that there's a misconception. I just think that, you know, we just bring a different lens into the spaces that makes us feel like, you know, united. I think that a lot of us kind of agree that we're in a really scary place right now, and we wanted to create content that makes us feel like, you know, we're in this together, and that voting matters and our voice matters and what we're going through matters, especially in a time of COVID where we can't have that physical community. I think digital storytelling is at the heart of this moment right now. And we have a lot of people doing a lot of work all the time, digital organizers, designers, you know, movement builders and shakers. And it's, you know, we're doing a lot of work and a lot of digital storytelling. And a lot of that comes from, you know, the Gen Zers and the millennials inspiring that work.
Thanks, Mac. John, I'm sorry I've delayed. You had a story that you wanted to share. John,
yes, thank you for calling on me, and I apologize for cutting you all off. I really do apologize. All right. So the story, it has to be related to the Gen Z and millennials, or can it be something different?
Oh, please, go ahead.
All right. So I grew up in a really rough neighborhood, and I used to be a bully. All right. And there was a lot of corruption. There was a lot of crime in this neighborhood. So like to protect myself, because if you weren't a part of a gang, you'd have to join a gang, or else you'd be bullied, you'd be shot or something, you know. You'd have a lot of crime on you. You'd really be facing a lot of rough times. So there was a lot of corruption. And when I grew up, I realized what I was doing wrong, and I felt pressured to join a gang. So I feel that it's important to vote because I want to stop corruption.
Excellent. Thank you.
Powerful.
Very. If I can use that, yeah, go ahead. Let me get. You want a mic?
All right. Yeah, my name is Ben. I'm obviously a Republican. But I'm voting. There's a very scary world we live in. Many riots in the city. I'm voting against that. I'm voting against the murder of thousands of babies every year done by Planned Parenthood. I'm voting against that. I'm voting against two groups, Antifa and BLM, who make it a habit of killing innocent police officers. I know now what happened to George Floyd was awful. I agree with that. But yeah, that I'm voting against that. I am also voting against corruption. When we have a story about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, this corrupt deal, I'm voting against that. I'm voting against a man who thinks that all Black people think the same, who said that if you have a problem voting for me or Trump, then you ain't Black. I have a strong problem with that. I'm voting against that. I'm voting against a guy who says, unlike the African American community, the Hispanic community is incredibly diverse. I have an extreme problem with that. And as having a father who died of a drug overdose, I'm voting against a man who signed a 1994 crime bill locking many people up for minor drug offenses. I have an extreme problem with that. And I have a problem with Kamala Harris describing young people as stupid. She did this in 2019. So that's why I'm voting. And, that's just my story.
Can people online hear me if I'm talking from here? No. Does anybody on the panel want to?
Sure, I'll say something. Thanks, Ben, for sharing that. I think it's brave of everyone here to be here today and speak up about their personal stories and who they're planning on voting for. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll respond. Ben, is that your first name? Sorry, couldn't really hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for talking about your kind of where you're coming from and using your faith as your driving force as to why you're voting. I come from the completely opposite side of the spectrum, and so every time I hear people explaining why they vote and using their faith as a way to push forward their beliefs, I think it's important to open a conversation about that. And so I'm happy that you shared, even though that we are on opposite sides of that. So I just wanted to say thanks, and just keep reading, keep researching, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I really like that we're having a discussion and it's, civil. I think the world needs more of this today, whether we're liberal, whether we're conservative, whether we vote for Trump or Biden, the world needs more of this. And I think this is great. So
one thing that I did want to say is that in this moment, in this space, I'd really like to protect the organizers doing great work at Cabrini right now, at BSU, and also just kind of honor what's happening in Philadelphia today, in Philadelphia last night. So I would really, if for this to be a very civil conversation, I'd really love for us to, use respect and dignity when kind of referring to the lives that have been lost. So I could just ask, this is a personal ask, if we could use respect and dignity when talking about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Walter Wallace Jr., any of the protests that are happening. I would urge us to kind of stay away from derogatory terms that could potentially be hurtful to some of our classmates and friends in the room and online. So I just want to also lift up that as a person of faith, we have to call to love our neighbors. And by creating this safe space online, I want to just hope that everyone's hopping into that same space.
Good job. I think somebody's sharing a screen. I'm not sure how that's going on. No commentary on the screen itself. I'm sorry, I'm flipping back to the chat. Seem to have lost. Here we go. Let me step into there. All right, thanks, Ben. I just wanted to also applaud the conversation that was happening. I think I've heard a lot of people say they don't want to get involved in politics because it's too hard or it's too nasty, or you know, they've seen adults fighting about this stuff and they don't want to get involved. They feel as an adult that they won't be able to do anything but fight if they get involved in these things. And I just applaud the back and forth that we've heard a little bit here. Ben, I know we talked a little bit earlier this year. You appreciated the way there was an openness to conversation on campus. I've got a question for our panelists. Do you feel like that's true? At Cabrini, did you experience an openness and an exchange? If so, where? If not, what could have been better? Or is that exchange not necessarily something that you would endorse in the first place?
I would say it depends. So I think Cabrini has like I had space to have open conversations. Like I took, if anyone's familiar with Profe, I took a couple of his classes, and he really has facilitation for open conversation. But I think when human rights are brought into question and you're questioning someone's humanity, I don't think that civil conversation is something that can happen or should happen. I think if someone's denying someone's right or someone's humanity simply by, say, like a candidate or like the views they support or certain measures, I feel like the civil conversation shouldn't happen because it's not a civil issue. Like, I feel like if someone's denying my right as a human, like they're questioning my existence and why I am in America or whatever, I feel like the civil conversation isn't going to be had with me, but that's just me personally. But I'm just not going to participate in that.
So in my experience, so someone who have read about the United States from the outside, right? And I like going to studying about the United States was something, a part of my classes in high school and also in college. But when I moved here, I actually wanted to find more and learn more and open my ears to the different experiences that people were having, whether it was in one side or the other. But as a person of faith, it denied the dignity that there is within a human being. Is when I got the trouble and kind of like, it was when it was hard for me to figure it out in a way that I could keep having that civil conversation. It made it hard, especially because I had so many experiences in my background and also my work here and while I was at Cabrini or in Philadelphia, with different families that are being impacted by negatively by the different like decisions that this administration is doing. It's been hard. So I think it's good that we're having this conversation. It's important because we need to listen the other side of the story. We need to listen why the other, and we need to be willing to compromise. We need to be willing to educate ourselves. So if after events like this, people on the other side is saying things like, I'm not familiar with, I don't understand, or I haven't heard at all, like, why don't I take the time to go and do a research and read and maybe try to give the space of like, maybe that person is right, or maybe that person is saying something that I didn't know, and do research.
For your
So
first year.
I'd like to hop in on like, this conversation of divisiveness. I think we kind of see it. I'm coming from a more national perspective rather than bringing it to Cabrini. But, when I was at Cabrini, it was predominantly a white liberal school. You felt comfortable kind of talking out, but not really, because we didn't know who was in the room, progressive, conservative. There was all different walks of life, great discussion. But I think, to ask that question is kind of skewed, because there's already great organizing on the ground at Cabrini fighting for justice for Black lives on student campus. And I just want to kind of reiterate that their asks are very clear, and that, we should be listening to the students that actually go to our school. So I want to lift that up. And I also want to say that, I was at the Supreme Court not too long ago, 2 weeks ago, the Monday after my grandmother of 75 years passed away. And as I was grieving, I was reminded a lot about my faith and how the importance of showing up for each other in a moment is so important. As we came together to hear about the Supreme Court hearing confirmation, and my organization, the action side of my organization showed up to, say that as people of faith, we don't believe in, we dissent, and we believe that to hold Ruth Bader Ginsburg's wishes to be true. And we were surrounded with really aggressive group of religious right, and it was a scary moment. And all I could think about was that I just want everyone that was surrounding me to be safe, and to feel that their vote counts, and that their people are safe to do, to walk the streets, and to be able to do whatever we need to do to live a healthy life. And so I just really want us to remember that there is severe divisiveness, not only on campus, but also nationally. And it, this is a very important time to vote.
Word. There was a comment shared and a question that I wanted to throw to the panel. First, Guillermo Lopes, G, shared out in the chat, I vote because I became a citizen when I was an undergrad, so it's important for me to practice my civic duty that me and my family worked so hard for to become documented. Thanks for the conversation. And then Vinayak Mathur had asked, as young voters, I'm curious about what issues the panelists are most passionate about as they are deciding who to vote for at the national and also the state and local level. And I think we've heard a lot about some of the issues already that people have raised up, but I'm wondering if we could key in on this thing that Mac and Vinayak both raised up, this difference between maybe the national and the local. I think a lot of people are really paying attention to the national elections. As voters, is that where your mind is at? Are you also thinking about the local? What's the difference there that you see between the national conversation and more state and local conversations?
I can touch on this first, if that's okay.
Thanks, yeah.
So I'm also living in DC, and I don't know, Mackenzie, if your neighborhood is experiencing this, but my neighborhood is gentrifying like crazy, and it's sad. It's extremely sad. And so, when I was filling out my ballot and doing research on local officials, I was researching for policies for the best interests of those who are living on the streets in my neighborhood. Unfortunately, there's a large amount of drug use here, and I can just see people suffering, and we have encampments on every corner here, and it's sad. It's really sad to see. So at the local level, I'm hoping, here in DC, homelessness can be addressed, and some sense of gentrification can be addressed. Because like you said, right, you know, it at the national level, it's much different than the local level. And I think it's easy to go blind to that when we're so stuck in the midst of what's happening on national television during debates and you know, what national policies are being brought to Congress. We easily lose sight of what's happening around us, what's happening to our next door neighbors. So it's really important to be cognizant of.
I'd like to just piggyback off of what Alexis said, and just, you know, if you're looking for those people to start conversations of like, who do I talk to about local issues and how can I get involved, just start asking questions, just start doing your research, finding organizers on Instagram that are posting about their work, and see where you fit in. You know, there's resources surrounding you, so just gotta look for them.
I mean, again, like I've been following a lot of the news in the national level, but also I've been trying to see what's happening in the neighborhood that I'm living in, or the neighbors in the past, the neighborhoods where I've been working with and the families that I've been working with. So learning more about like in connections and relationships, because at the end of the day, this vote that I have, and I said it before, it's personal, is the way to reclaim my power, but also is to see how the people that is around me is being affected by, and how I can use this power in me to connect with others. So so being following what's local is as much important as what the national level is right now.
Didn't a question ask about like what we're also voting on? Like,
yeah, if you've got issues that you want to raise up.
So like I mentioned earlier, I don't think a lot of people in our generation are like single issue voters. So I'm voting for the planet. I know that another 4 years of the current administration, we're accelerating like every day. We're not really stopping or pausing climate change. So that's a really big thing for me. I'm voting in favor of Black Lives Matter, in favor of somebody thinking that my life is important and that it counts just as much as anybody else's. And then when it comes to like local and other issues, I like to look for candidates who are against fracking, because I know Pennsylvania is a big fracking state. And again, I'm a big environmentalist. So I like to look for candidates that are against that. And that's easier to find on the local level when it comes to like your state and like local representatives that go to the state house. So it's also easier to push if anyone's like interested in getting into politics, start local, because you can also push your politicians a lot easier when they're local, because it's not as big as a constituency. So it's easy to rally up like a couple signatures and be like, we're all against this issue. You should be too. So that's another thing if anyone's looking to get involved.
Excellent. Alexis had to jump off. She's got another meeting that she's going to. But I did want to just lift up a theme that I've heard from everybody that's spoken today. It sounds like everybody who is talking about why they're voting is voting in some part for somebody else because they care about others. It's not just I'm walking in there because I want my self-interest served when I punch that ballot. And I think that's a great place to start. We are clearly in a nation where there's a lot of differences and a lot of distance between people, but I think beginning with that concern for others is not a bad place to begin. I wanted to give one last chance. If you had panelists, if you had one thing to tell a classmate, a friend, somebody who is thinking about not voting, maybe they registered to vote and they're thinking maybe they're going to stay home, what would you tell them? What's one last little piece of advice or a message or something that you would deliver to them?
I have one. I was just thinking about this when you were talking. The biggest thing would be you're not voting for yourself. You're voting for the lives of so many other people that can't vote, people that don't have the opportunity, or people that will vote, but like they're just in a state where their vote, like say for like a red state, you know, like you're voting in their favor. And also like when it comes to that, even if you don't 100% agree with the candidate, it's always about who most likely aligns up with your morals. I feel like morality is a really big thing, especially this election. So vote with your heart, but also vote with the mind of like others who are less fortunate or don't have the ability to in your mind.
Excellent.
I'm just gonna say, don't give your voice to someone else. Don't give the right of participation to someone else. Exercise that right and use it. Use it.
Wear a
And Mac?
mask, show up, wear a mask. Early vote if you can. Don't mail in your ballot, just bring it to the ballot box. That's an important reminder because you've missed the due date of when that needs to go out. And last but not least, vote for the care of our humanity. Vote for each other, vote for your community, vote for Black Lives Matter, Black Trans Lives Matter. Vote for Cabrini, vote for your family.
Excellent. All right. Mac was also reading my mind a little bit because I did have a slide of concrete advice for what people should do. For some reason, I'm not able to pull it up here. But yes, so if you are going to vote, if you have registered to vote, well done. It's too late to register if you haven't already. But research your vote. We encourage people to check out vote411.org, which is run by the Non-Partisan League of Women Voters. They're excellent partners of ours in all of this voter engagement work. Also, look up your polling place. Make sure you know where it is. If you are, so Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd. Confirm where you are registered to vote. Like Max said, it's too late to request a mail-in ballot in Pennsylvania, but you may still, if you have one already, you can drop it off in person at one of the drop boxes. You cannot vote early anymore in Pennsylvania. That closed with the vote by mail. But again, if you have that ballot, you can drop it off still. If you're going in person, confirm your place. And we encourage people to be patient, stay calm, and take care of yourself. Wear a mask, social distance if you're waiting in line. Don't let anybody turn you away from a polling place without voting. If you're in line before that polling place closes, you have the right to cast that vote. If you have some complication with a requested mail-in ballot, you can vote with a provisional ballot. And you can follow that, all the action after Election Day. And then finally, I am personally going to ask you to give the process a chance. This is not the Sixers. I hope things turn out better than things have with the Sixers so far. We'll see where this process goes, but there's a lot of talk about preempting what might be a long process in finding out who wins on Election Day. Please pay attention. You've heard people say study, read up, make sure you know what's going on. Don't be led astray, and give this process a chance to work out. And let's see how things work from the national level all the way down to the most local school board levels. With that, I'd like to invite Evelyn to come up and give us a little closing prayer. And in the meantime, could you please join me in thanking our panelists and everybody else who participated today for sharing their thoughts and their heart. Thank you so much.
As we continue to meditate upon how ready we are to make our voice being heard, and as we are looking forward to playing our role this election, let us take a minute to pause and reflect how this means to all of us. Just a minute. Based on our religious background, let us pray that we may inform and educate ourselves by our faiths and beliefs. St. Francis Cabrini, you tirelessly built the kingdom of God in America. Join us in praying for this election, for all the candidates, and for those who are looking forward to vote on Tuesday. Heavenly Father, give us the gift of hope as we face worldly governments. Lord, we give you permission to form our consciences according to the gospel, so that we may vote and, more importantly, act for the kingdom of God. As we wrestle with the complexity of political life, let us never forget the dignity of every person made in your image, the unborn, the poor, the vulnerable, the refugee, those affected by war, and those suffering from the falling of political system of this world. Lord, we pray for our political components, that we may love them as you love them. Help us to remember that political power can never replace the mission of the church to preach the gospel to all the nations. Give us the courage to always be detached from our political loyalties and be first a faithful followers of Jesus, the true King. And when it comes time for us to contribute to the political realm, help us to cast our vote in a way that is pleasing to you. For this election, oh God, please bless us with the best rulers possible in this fallen world at all levels of government. Finally, just as you brought our salvation from the terrible death of your Son, we pray that from the political campaigns of this world, you will bring about great good for your people. Amen. Saint Francis Xavier Cabrini, pray for us.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you for the work of the student leaders and voter engagement. Thank you for our panelists and sharing their hearts and their hopes and their determination with the vote. Thanks to everybody who attended and shared your thoughts or were open to listening to others. I would encourage you, if you were sparked by any of the conversation about activism that came up a few times today, check out our Activism 101 series that's continuing this year. The Wolfingen Center is offering another session on finding allies and power mapping. These are ways that individuals can amplify their influence in the political process. Check us out on our website or watch for an email invite. Otherwise, thank you all again for coming and have a wonderful day.